Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And as we are pursuing a repeat here in 2037, doing a pretty good job saving the A's just far, a 34-18 record 2 months into the season. We are half a game behind in the division. Certainly hoping to ultimately win the division title and get a first round bye this year, which we did not have the advantage of last season when we did win the title. With the nice bump, 15 points to fan interest that we got in terms of winning the title last year, we've been able to be selling out very consistently. We've raised our ticket prices a couple times over the course of the season each month, and given that it's a new month, just raised them from $32 to $33. Hopefully at some point we'll find a number that allows us to come pretty darn close to selling out while generating a lot more revenue. At this point, revenue is set to be up about 25% a game compared to a year ago. So hopefully another successful season on the field, and perhaps the most successful season we're going to have on the profit and loss statement will result in a nice bump in our budget next year, and maybe we can get out of 29th and, move up to 28th, 27th, maybe even 26th in the majors in terms of our budget next year. But things going well on the field and things going well in terms of the financials here 2 months into the season. And before we really start moving forward with the episode, the pitching staff, which is doing very well for us this year, as it often has over the course of this playthrough, has certainly generated the most feedback from our worldwide scouting department over the past few episodes. A lot of opinions on a lot of different things. Patrick DeBonis joined the representatives from Great Britain in the worldwide scouting department in terms of not liking the Camden Reisinger acquisition in free agency. Wyme943 thinks we should perhaps trade away Chris Carl, who's about to come off of the IL, and Camden Reisinger. Sean Gratton, among others, still wants us to give a chance to the young pitcher Doug Weiss in the rotation rather than Jason DeCaro. DeCaro is being used in the rotation largely because of his captain personality. Want to continue to get the benefit of that with a difficult personality like Reisinger on the team. Although, quite honestly, even if we didn't have Reisinger on the team, I'd probably be leaning towards ensuring that we do have a captain personality in the locker room. Paul West recently brought up a good point that it didn't look like Jeremy Scholl was getting a lot of innings pitched as a setup man, and totally agree with that. And we're going to give him a supplemental role as a middle reliever to hopefully get a few more innings out of him. He also suggested maybe swapping DeCaro out of the rotation, but unlike some others, he suggested Bobby Garland, who was very effective for us last year as a fifth starter, might be the one to try. Alkshy had a similar view. He also kind of likes Mr. Weiss as our stopper rather than moving him into the rotation, and Weiss has been incredibly effective in that role. And last but not least on the pitchers, Quiet Time brought up the point that if we move Mr. DeCaro to closer, we could keep that captain personality effective. And Quiet Time suggested maybe just go with two closers, a little bit perhaps of a loophole in the system to try to do that. It's not something that I've done before, but I'm going to play around with it right now. So the reason I've been talking about all of these pitching suggestions and not being on the pitching change is because I kind of just wanted to talk through the feedback and thoughts from the worldwide scouting department before I show you what we've ended up doing. We are going to move Garland back into the rotation. As I mentioned, the lefty was pretty solid for us last year. Spent most of the year as a fifth starter, went 11-8 with a 3.95 ERA for us. I really like what Weiss has done in the stopper role with a sub-2 ERA, 44 and two-thirds innings, and I think at some point down the line he will be in our rotation. It very conceivably could be next year if we end up moving on from Jackson Ferris. I get the point that Sean Gratton and others have brought up. We are in a pretty intense postseason race here in the AL West. And as we found out last year when we lost the final 2 games of the season to move from potentially having the best record in the American League and home field advantage throughout the AL playoffs to having to play in a wild card series in the first round, that winning every game does matter. And I don't want people to think that I'm not trying to win, but I do think that having a happy clubhouse can help us win games in addition to having good pitchers in the starting rotation. So Weiss, for the time being, is going to remain in the stopper role. Reisinger still on the team for the time being, and we are going to go with 2 closers because you can see if we have Jason DeCaro in that closer role, the personality class captain still shows up. I don't know how well this is going to actually work, and it does seem a little bit cheesy to me, but I don't know how long I'm actually going to do this, but I'm just kind of throwing some stuff up against the wall right now, and thought Quiet Time had a interesting suggestion. You can see we have added in the middle relief role for Jeremy Scholl at this point. Going to spend a little more time figuring out who's going to be our long reliever going forward since Garland was in that role. But once I figure that out, it's time to get moving. And we do have on the injured list Chris Carl in Las Vegas, only 2 days left on that rehab assignment. Making a fair amount of money, and he's wrecked physically at this point. Fortunately, the team options kick in next year and will likely be moving on from him. But Carl also has 2 option years left, so what I actually think I'm inclined to do is, rather than trading him, since he has very little trade value, we'd have to take back a contract that's longer and worse than his from a player who's not very good in return to get him off the books. Probably just going to stash him in AAA after the rehab assignment is over, since he does still have options. Doesn't mean we won't see him again. Particularly if we end up making some other trades. It's not inconceivable that we end up moving on from Reisinger at some point, but I am not quite there yet. He hasn't been good this year, but 13 1/3 innings is a pretty small sample size, to be fair. And we ended up moving Kamani O'Banner out of the setup role into that long relief role. Still going to have a secondary role as a setup guy, but he's got some of the better stamina of anyone in our bullpen. Honestly, he's got the highest stamina of anyone on our team, including the starters at this point. We tweaked the settings on Weiss a bit so he can come in the 7th game now, since we've also got DeCaro in the bullpen. Don't know how this is all going to work out, but always interested in trying something a little different and seeing when we throw spaghetti up against the wall, whether it just makes a mess or it occasionally makes beautiful artwork. And unfortunately, we're probably not going to get a huge sample size to see what happens with the changes we've made with the pitching, because Jackson Ferris banged up day-to-day with back tightness for the next 1 to 2 weeks. Given that he's 33 years old, he's fragile physically, we're just going to be very conservative with him and put him on the IL. We've got enough depth at starting pitching that we need to ensure, more importantly, that Ferris is going to be available to pitch for us and start when we want him to in the playoffs, more so than here in the first couple weeks of the month of June. And after all the discussion around pitching, with the fact that we put Mr. Ferris on the IL, we actually moved DeCaro back into the 5 spot in the rotation behind Bobby Garland for the time being. Kamani O'Banner went back to a setup role, and we did promote Chris Carl off of the rehab assignment that he was on to be our long reliever. So haven't really changed all that much. I am still looking at Reisinger. I am still considering what we want to do with Weiss. As I mentioned, he's been incredibly effective as a setup man for us. The 2.2 WAR that he's put up there is better than what we've gotten from any of our starting pitchers yet this year. And that includes the brilliant rookie Jesus Saldana, who's at a 1.2 WAR, even though he's got a 6-2 record and a sub-3 ERA. I do listen to and appreciate all the thoughts from the worldwide scouting department on this. I get that a lot of people don't like Reisinger. I get that a lot of people don't like how we're using Weiss right now, but fortunately for me, I'm the general manager of this organization, and the buck ultimately stops with me. Maybe if my New York Jets former head coach, Robert Saleh, had kind of a similar outlook and had been living up to his all gas, no brake motto over the 3+ years that he was the head coach of the New York Jets, perhaps he would still be their head coach. And the month of June is off to a pretty solid start. We took 3 out of 4 at home against the Angels, and we've won the first 2 at home against the Orioles before we go on the road against Texas and Baltimore next week. So we have gotten ourselves back into first place, and playing against the Angels and winning 3 out of 4 against them has enabled us to move 2.5 ahead of them. Brailovsky continues to have a monster season for us. Juan Ramos, once again, an RBI machine. Pitching-wise, don't have any pitchers right at the top of the rankings. But things are going reasonably well at 39-19, and we were a little worried that our superstar, Jake Ortega, may have just gone into some kind of regression when at 29 years old he should still be close to the prime of his career, hitting .235 with 5 homers, 26 ribbies, and 37 runs scored this season. So we pulled an updated scouting report on him, and he looks pretty similar to how he's always looked. That BABIP of 275 is still 85 points below where it was a year ago. Despite the fact that he's only hitting .235, he's still been a slightly above average offensive player and almost 2 wins above replacement level. Not playing quite at the same rate and performing quite at the same level that he used to, but still should ultimately have a pretty solid season, and happy to see with this updated scouting report that it doesn't look like he's just gone into some massive regression as he closes in on turning 30 years old in a couple of months. And our A's continue to play well, 40-20 record with a win and a loss since the last time we checked in. Backup catcher Jaden Boakai, going to be a day-to-day for a day with a thumb contusion, so that's not that significant. That was yesterday as well. But Jeremy Scholl, the reliever, strained ab, going to be out for about 4 weeks. He's had a nice year for us. Scholl has been a starter, not a starter. He's been a closer for us at times over the years. I was going to call him a saver, but I don't know why I thought that was the proper terminology to use. But he has, over the course of his years with us, picked up saves in every season but this one thus far. And at least a month, so probably close to the All-Star break before he'll get a chance to continue his streak of saving at least 1 game every season for us. He had been playing really well for us, a 151 ERA plus, 79 FIP minus, only 16 innings pitched, but still will be a loss for the bullpen to have Mr. Scholl out of commission. And with that injury, we are going to give another one of our prospects in our organization a chance to make his major league debut. We brought up Jonathan Scherer, 15th round draft pick in 2031, but a guy who's developed pretty well. 23 years old now, 10 games in AAA this year, a 2.77 ERA with 14 strikeouts over 13 innings pitched. I think the young right-hander could be a pretty solid arm out of our bullpen. Throws in the mid to high 90s, has that sidearm arm slot that I know some of you don't love. But we will see exactly what Mr. Scherer is able to do against Major League pitching. Might only be up for about a week, since about a week from now is when, if everything goes well with Jackson Ferris, he'll be back from that preventative IL stint that we put him on. But hopefully we'll get to see Scherer at least a couple of times between now and then. And our Oakland A's have continued to play incredibly well here in the month of June. The record stands at 45-21 here on June 16th. We've extended our lead in the AL West to 5 games, and we have the best record in the American League and the best record in baseball. So things are going incredibly well as we try to, as we've talked about, position this team for a repeat here in 2037. However, the one thing that we could not afford to have happen to this team injury-wise has unfortunately just happened. And it's been a rough year for injuries for us thus far. Our ace Jackson Ferris on the mound, Jeremy Scholl, an important arm in the bullpen, still out, and Alejandro Landin, starting second baseman, and Colt Keith, the veteran infielder, who was our starting first baseman against right-handed pitchers, all on the IL. But more significant than that, the franchise, Jake Ortega, a broken kneecap, and he is going to be out for 9 months. So we're going to get to see what Sergio Palomares can do in center field playing every day. But huge loss for the team. Ortega had started to play a little better, but still going to be a fractured season for him, unfortunately, figuratively and literally at this point. Going to finish the year hitting just 247. Did get the WRC plus up to 110 and a 2.4 WAR on the season. But the switch hitter is going to be 30 years old before he plays another game for the Oakland A's. And if we are to repeat this season, it's going to be without the franchise, as Mr. Ortega's year is over. Not going to be shocking if he comes back at the age of 30, is wrecked in terms of his injury proneness. But we'll handle and deal with that if and when the circumstance presents itself. But at this point, the hope is that we have him back for the start of next season. And at this point, it looks like he might be able to play a little bit towards the end of spring training and hopefully be ready to contribute much more than he did this season next year. And with that significant injury to Jake Ortega, Sergio Palomares is going to come our everyday center fielder and our leadoff hitter. Palomares had been a fourth or fifth outfielder for us this year, starting only 8 games, but did hit .310 in the 42 at-bats that he had. His contact, his gap power, and his eye are all pretty solid. Still is yet to hit a major league home run. But like his speed, he's not quite Jake Ortega defensively, but think he can be a pretty useful player, and he's going to get the opportunity to play every day. And we also promoted Federico Aldana. You may remember him, the 27-year-old international free agent we signed to a minor league deal out of Cuba, with the fact that we put Ortega onto the 60-day IL that opened up the 40th spot on our 40-man roster. Aldana was not on it yet, but he had hit .329 with 20 homers and 59 ribbies and 240 AAA at-bats. Not the greatest defensive outfielder, but we do think, particularly against left-handed pitching, that home run power and that eye are going to be useful. And interestingly, the guy that we've typically been playing at left field against left-handed pitchers for the last few years, Luis Taveras, who now has an opportunity to play against right-handed pitching and is still hitting .294 this year. Taveras has been a guy who's been good against left-handed pitching for us, but he's actually kind of been better against right-handed pitching for us. When we look at Taveras, he's got very even, in fact, perfectly even ratings against both. And just think that we're going to go with the guy who we think has a little more pop in his bat in Aldana. So Taveras still going to be getting more playing time than usual. But interestingly, the right-handed hitter isn't going to be starting against left-handed pitching. The only lefties we have in the lineup against lefties are Brailovsky, who's in the running for an MVP award this year, and Ramos, who once again has one of the top RBI bats in the American League. So clearly not going to be removing either of those players from the lineup. And Jackson Ferris ready to come off the IL. We're going to bring him back onto the team. Scherer only had 1 2/3 innings of opportunity. Pitched in just one game, allowed 1 hit, but it was a home run, so that certainly didn't help him. We are going to send him down to AAA for a little more seasoning to open up a spot on the roster. The big question is what we're going to do in terms of adjusting the starters and the bullpen and closers to make room back on the roster for Mr. Ferris. And Bobby Garland has been fantastic for us since we moved him into the rotation. 3 games started this year, 17 innings pitched, a 2.12 ERA, and a 3-0 record with just 10 hits allowed and 16 strikeouts. So certainly not going to move Garland out of the rotation. So we're going to kind of end up back where we thought we were at the start of this episode. We're going to use DeCaro as a co-closer with Reisinger. Again, maybe a little gaming of the system involved there. Weiss still doing a really nice job, pitching a lot of innings for us out of the bullpen in that stopper role. Carl's still going to be our long reliever. Huntley and Curtis doing well as middle relievers, and O'Banner and Cope as our setup guys, given that we've got 3 guys for the later innings. So we'll see how this works out over this next couple of weeks before we get to the month of July, and maybe start thinking about getting some other players healthy. Probably will have another decision that we need to make as far as the pitching staff once Mr. Scholl is ready to come back. But until we get to that point, we'll see how this odd setup that we have ends up working out. And unfortunately, another pitching injury. Chris Carl with a dead arm. Only going to impact him for about a week, but don't want to run with only 12 pitchers for that long by benching him. So we brought Jonathan Scherer back. Not necessarily ideal for the long relief role, given that he's only got 25 stamina, but he's a rookie. You do what you got to do to be on the Major League roster. And finally, some good news. Alejandro Landin, about to begin a rehab assignment, can probably do the same thing with Colt Keith tomorrow. So we should have our starting first and second baseman back in the not too distant future on the Major League team. Clearly having the 2 of them back will hopefully help offset the massive hit that the injury to Jake Ortega means for our lineup. And we've made it to July 1st, and it's been another excellent month for the Oakland A's. We sit here with a 53-27 record, 4.5 games up on the Rangers in the AL West, and our .663 winning percentage. Still the best in all of baseball. Our closest competition, of course, is our division rivals, the Texas Rangers. Brailovsky hitting .337, leading the league in hitting as we are one game away from the midway point of the year. Juan Ramos leading the league in homers and second in ribbies. And pitching-wise, our brilliant rookie Jesus Saldana now leading the league with a .184 ERA and third in the league with 9 strikeouts. Mr. Saldana just won the American League Rookie of the Month, 3-1 record with a .054 ERA in 6 starts, running his record to 9-3 with that league best ERA that we just mentioned. And with the good ball that we've been playing over the last month, continuing to sell out every game, so we'll bump the ticket price up another $1, see if we can very least generate more revenue per game, but hopefully at some point get to a point where I guess we're not technically selling out every game, but we're within less than 200 people away from selling out every game, so generating a lot of money this year. Before we finish up the episode, I'll take a quick look at our team statistics. We'll do the full mid-season review next time around, but we ended up 19-9 in the month of June. Our 53-27 record is actually 2 worse than Pythagorean expectations, which says a lot about how well this team has been playing. Ranked first in the American League in runs scored, and you can see we are first or second in the vast majority of offensive categories, 5th in homers, 5th in strikeouts, and 5th in stolen bases are pretty much the worst that we are in terms of the counting statistics. Not great base running wise. And we are also featuring the best pitching staff in the American League, first in the American League in runs allowed. And you can see we are first or second in almost every pitching category as well. 3rd in defensive efficiency, 5th in zone rating. So despite the issues, despite the concerns that we have and the concerns from viewers about whether we're managing our pitching, notably Mr. Weiss, as effectively as possible, everything is working out incredibly well so far for these Oakland A's here in 2037. With the exception of those injuries, and of course losing our best player, Jake Ortega, for the entire season. And Doug Weiss remains very effective in that stopper role. He's already pitched 62 2/3 innings, so it looks like he's probably going to pitch 125 to 130 innings out of the bullpen in that stopper role if he keeps up this pace. 2.15 ERA, 71 strikeouts in those 62 2/3 innings pitched. Almost a 3 WAR already. Looks like he's going to continue developing into a monster, not surprisingly. The price for him continues to go up, now looking for about $200 million for a 10-year deal. So certainly doesn't look like we're going to really save any money by not having him in the starting rotation. Given that we do have control of him on his contract for the next, I believe, 5.5 seasons, since we manipulated his service time a little bit at the start of the 2036 season. And given that he was a college player who's already 25 years old and fragile physically, likely to just let him continuing to play out these minimum years and these arbitration years, which obviously could get pretty expensive if he remains this effective. I do feel a little bit with Mr. Weiss, who you may remember, he did not have that changeup when he came into our organization. He was a 4th-round pick that we felt was good value for a reliever. But when I look at Mr. Weiss's reticence to sign what I would consider a reasonable contract with us and his very bold price tag and requests, does make me think of that old 80s song. from the Human League, Don't You Want Me Baby. And I feel like we had a lot to do with developing Mr. Weiss and putting him through our development lab, coaching him up to develop the best pitch in his arsenal. And I do feel with Mr. Weiss that it's not a healthy relationship at this point, because I do feel kind of, don't forget, it was me that put you where you are now. And I can put you back down too. I mean, that song doesn't really seem like it's about a particularly healthy relationship. And certainly Weiss deserves some of the credit for his development into a guy that's looking like one of the top pitchers in baseball potentially. But we had a lot to do with that development, Mr. Weiss. And you don't seem to be willing to meet us in the middle as far as a contract extension, which may mean that eventually we need to go our separate ways. Another great song from the 80s by Journey, for what it's worth. And with that, we'll finish up the episode. As I mentioned, next time around, we'll do our mid-season review and probably also tee up the amateur draft. The injury situation is getting a little better. Carl completely healthy now, so he just needs to sit out another week or so. Jeremy Scholl should be back and available in about a week as well. So despite all of the significant injuries we've had over the course of this season, a week from now we could be pretty darn healthy again, with the exception that the franchise, Jake Ortega, is going to miss the rest of the season and put together what is by far for him the worst year of his major league career, with just a 109 WRC plus. Outside of the 58 bats he had as a September call-up in 2031, the lowest WRC plus he's ever had for us is a 146 last season. So definitely disappointing that Mr. Ortega's year is done, and certainly feel like our chances of getting the back-to-back championships are clearly lower without him than they would be with him. But those are the breaks, and we'll do our full mid-season review and see how his replacement, Mr. Palomares, is doing next time around. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.